I was sitting across from my brother-in-law in a lawyer's office in downtown Calgary when he slid a document across the table and told me to sign it before I had time to read it properly. My hands were cold. The lawyer was watching. My husband was sitting right beside me, and he wouldn't look at me. I thought the worst moment of my life was already happening. I was wrong. Because 30 seconds before my pen touched that paper, my sister-in-law stood up from her chair, walked to the middle of the room, and said the 6 words that unraveled everything. She doesn't know what this is. My name is Tessa Vance. I'm 37 years old. At the time this happened, I had been married to my husband for 9 years, and I had spent most of those 9 years believing that his family was also my family. I was wrong about that too. Let me go back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without it. My husband and I met in our late 20s at a mutual friend's dinner party in Edmonton. He was quiet, careful with his words, the kind of person who listened more than he talked. I liked that about him immediately. We dated for 2 years before we got married, and for the first few years of our marriage, things were genuinely good. We bought a house in a neighborhood we loved. We had a dog named Biscuit. We talked about starting a family. His parents were warm to me in the way that felt real, not performed. His brother was around often, and while I wouldn't say we were close, we were friendly enough. His sister lived in Vancouver, and I didn't see her as much. But when I did, I always liked her. She seemed straightforward. She said what she meant. I respected that. What I didn't know at the time was that his brother had been quietly building something. Not a business exactly. More like a slow-moving plan that involved everyone in that family except me. My husband's family had always had a small business. His father had started it decades ago. A property management company with several rental units spread across southern Alberta. Nothing enormous, but steady. When his father's health started declining about 4 years ago, the question of what to do with the business became a real conversation. His brother had been working in real estate for years by then, and he stepped in to help manage things. My husband was involved too, doing the bookkeeping on weekends, keeping things organized alongside his regular job. I supported all of it. It was their family's legacy. Of course I wanted to help where I could. What I didn't realize was that somewhere along the way, my husband had become a name on legal documents in ways I hadn't been told about. Our joint assets, including our house, had been used informally as security for a line of credit the business had taken out. My name was on that house, which meant, without me fully understanding it, I had a stake in something I'd never agreed to. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a social worker. I know how to read people. I know how to sit in hard conversations and not flinch. What I did not know at 37 years old, sitting in a glass-walled office in downtown Calgary, was that I was about to learn what financial betrayal actually feels like from the inside. The trouble started. At least the visible trouble. About 8 months before that day in the lawyer's office. My husband started getting quiet in a way that felt different from his usual quiet. This was a closed-off kind of silence. He stopped talking about the future. We had been looking at schools in our area because we were seriously considering adoption, and suddenly he went cold on the subject. When I brought it up, he said he needed to focus on work. When I pushed, he said I was making things harder than they needed to be. That phrase came up a lot. I'm making things harder. I'm overthinking. I'm being too sensitive. I'm a social worker. I know what it sounds like when someone is deflecting. I asked him directly, more than once, whether something was wrong with the business. He told me no. He told me everything was fine. He told me he just needed some space to work through a stressful period. I believed him, or at least I tried to. I told myself that marriages go through seasons. I told myself I should trust the 9 years we'd built together. Then one evening in February, he came home with a folder of documents and told me there was something we needed to talk about. He sat me down at the kitchen table. The dog curled up at my feet, and he explained that the business was in trouble. A major tenant had left. There had been some costs associated with repairs that came in higher than expected, and the line of credit had grown. He told me, The bank had called in part of the debt. He told me his brother had a plan to restructure things and that it would require some paperwork. He told me not to worry. He told me it would all be sorted out quickly. I asked to see the paperwork. He said it wasn't ready yet. I asked again a week later. He said his brother was still working with the lawyer. I asked a third time and he got irritated, which was unlike him, and told me I needed to trust the process. That was when I stopped trusting the process. I made an appointment with my own lawyer. Not to start anything. I just wanted to understand what our actual legal and financial exposure was, given that our house had come up more than once in vague ways during these conversations. My lawyer pulled up some records, made some calls, and called me back 2 days later with information that made my stomach drop. The line of credit connected to the business was larger than my husband had indicated. Significantly larger, and the way the documents had been structured, our house was listed as collateral. In a way that I had technically consented to years earlier through a document I had signed without fully understanding what I was signing. A document my husband had handed me during a weekend visit to his parents' house, mixed in with some other papers, when his father was in the hospital and everyone was stressed. I had signed it because he asked me to, and I trusted him. I sat in my car outside my lawyer's office for a long time after that call. I wasn't crying, which surprised me. I was just very still. The way you go still when something finally confirms what you already sensed but didn't want to believe. I confronted my husband that night. He admitted that the exposure was real, but insisted the restructuring plan would eliminate the risk. He swore the house was not going to be touched. He swore that his brother had everything under control. I told him I wanted to be in the room for any meeting that involved our finances going forward. He agreed, and I thought that meant something. The meeting in the lawyer's office was set for a Thursday morning in late April. I arranged to take the day off work. My husband and I drove downtown together. His brother was already there when we arrived, sitting at the head of a long table with a man I didn't recognize, who was introduced to me as a financial consultant. The lawyer was on his brother's side of the table, not positioned neutrally the way I would have expected. That small detail bothered me, and I filed it away. His brother ran through a presentation about the restructuring. It was detailed. It was fast. He used a lot of technical language and moved through slides quickly, and I could feel the pace of it was designed to carry you forward without giving you time to pause. I know that technique. I've sat in government meetings where it gets used on families who don't have advocates in the room. I noticed it immediately. When he finished, he slid a document across the table to me and my husband. He said it was a consent form acknowledging our agreement with the restructuring plan and releasing the business's liability tied to our property. He said the lawyer had reviewed it. He said it was standard. He said we could take a few minutes to look it over. A few minutes. For a document that was 11 pages long. My husband picked up his pen. I put my hand on his arm. I need more time than a few minutes, I said. His brother smiled in the way that wasn't quite a smile. Tessa, we've been over this for months. The timelines is critical here. If we don't get this filed by end of week, I'd like to read it, I said. There was a silence in that room that felt thick. My husband looked at the table. The financial consultant looked at his phone. The lawyer looked at his brother. I flipped to the first page and started reading. I'm a careful reader. It's part of my job. I read case files, legal assessments, court reports. I know how to move through dense language and find the operative clauses. I was about 4 pages in when I found something that didn't match what I'd been told. The document wasn't just releasing liability connected to the line of credit. There was language buried in Section 7 that would transfer a portion of our equity into a numbered company I had never heard of. My mouth went dry. I kept reading. I kept my face neutral. One of the first things you learn in social work is how to absorb difficult information without showing your reaction before you're ready. I looked up at my brother-in-law. Can you tell me about the numbered company in Section 7? The room changed. I can't explain it precisely. The temperature didn't shift. Nobody moved dramatically. But something in the air changed. His brother glanced at the lawyer. The lawyer looked down. My husband went very still beside me. It's just a holding structure, his brother said. Standard practice for restructuring. Whose holding company is it? Pause. It's part of the business reorganization. That's not what I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. It was in that exact moment, that stretched, uncomfortable, revealing silence, that the door to the conference room opened. Everyone turned. His sister stood in the doorway. She was still in her coat, like she'd come straight from the airport. Her expression was composed, but her jaw was tight in the way that meant she'd been holding something in for a while. Her brother stood immediately. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer him. She looked at me, and she said it. "She doesn't know what this is." The room erupted in a way that conference rooms don't usually erupt. Her brother's voice rose. The lawyer interjected. My husband said her name sharply. She didn't raise her voice at all. She just walked to the table, set her bag down, and pulled out her own folder of documents. "Sit down," she said to the room, with the kind of quiet authority that makes people actually sit down. "I've spent the past 3 weeks going through the company books with an accountant in Vancouver. You're going to want to hear this." Her brother's face had gone a color I don't have a word for. Not quite red. More like the color of something that knows it's been caught. She laid out what she had found, methodically, calmly. Like she had rehearsed this, because she had. Over the past 2 years, the numbered company in Section 7 had been used to quietly siphon revenue away from the family business. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The rental income that should have been retained in the business had been partially redirected. The line of credit that had supposedly ballooned due to repairs and vacancy was, in fact, only partly the result of those things. A significant portion of the debt had been manufactured to justify exactly this kind of restructuring meeting. The kind where a stressed family signs documents quickly because they're told the timeline is critical. The kind where a spouse who doesn't know what she's signing away agrees to transfer equity into a holding company that belongs, quietly, to her brother-in-law. Over $40,000 had been moved in the past 18 months. In Canada, that kind of unauthorized movement of funds within a family business structure carries serious legal weight. She had already spoken to a lawyer in Vancouver before she got on the plane. I looked at my husband. He was staring at his hands. "Did you know?" I asked him. My voice was quieter than I expected it to be. He didn't answer immediately. That pause told me something, and I had to sit with what it told me. "Not all of it," he finally said. "I knew things were complicated. I didn't know the extent of it." "Did you know the document I was about to sign would transfer our equity?" Another pause. "He told me it was the only way to save the properties." I set down my copy of the document. I placed my pen beside it. I did not sign anything that day. The meeting ended in a way that was not clean or cinematic. His brother left the room without speaking further. The financial consultant, who I later learned was a personal associate of his brother's, not an independent party, followed. The lawyer stayed behind, and, to his credit, acknowledged to my husband and me that he had not been given full information about the structure of the transaction, and that he would be withdrawing from the file. In the hallway afterward, his sister stood with me, while my husband made phone calls in the corner. She looked exhausted. She'd been carrying this since she found discrepancies in the company records during a visit home, months earlier. She hadn't said anything immediately, because she needed to be sure. She needed documentation. She couldn't bring a suspicion into a room with her brother. She needed to bring proof. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked her. "I didn't want to tell you about your husband," she said. "I didn't know how much he knew. I didn't know what I'd be doing to your marriage if I was wrong." I understood that logic. It didn't make the months of silence easier to carry, but I understood it. The drive home from downtown was the longest 40 minutes of my life. My husband drove. I looked out the window at the city I'd lived in for 12 years and felt like I was seeing it from behind glass. He tried to talk twice, and I asked him not to. I needed to think without his words in the way. That night, after a long time of silence in the house, he sat down across from me at the kitchen table, and he talked. Really talked, in the way he hadn't in months. He told me that when he first found irregularities in the books about a year ago, he had confronted his brother privately. His brother had a story ready. Cash flow timing, accounting method differences, nothing alarming. My husband had wanted to believe him. They were brothers. The business was their father's. Raising it further felt like an accusation that might destroy the family. So instead, I said, you let it almost destroy us. He didn't argue with that. He said, yes. He told me his brother had come to him 6 months ago with the restructuring idea, framing it as the only way to stabilize things. He had walked my husband through documents that obscured the numbered company's purpose. He told him it was a standard protective structure that lawyers use during reorganizations. He told him, Tessa just needs to sign consent. It's routine. She doesn't need to be worried with the details. My husband had let himself believe that protecting me from the details was the same as protecting me. He had chosen the path of least confrontation at every turn and called it love. I told him that wasn't love. I told him that was convenience dressed up as care. He cried, which I had not seen in 9 years of marriage. I didn't comfort him, not that night. I wasn't ready, and pretending I was would have been its own kind of dishonesty. The weeks that followed were among the hardest of my life, but they were also clarifying in a way I didn't expect. My husband cooperated fully with the accountant his sister brought in and with the independent review that followed. The Canada Revenue Agency was notified of the irregularities. His brother, who had, until that week, been someone I saw at Christmas and summer-long weekends and had thought of as harmless if a bit aggressive, was facing a formal complaint and a civil claim from the estate of their father's business. The family business itself was placed under independent administration while everything was sorted out. Our house was not at risk because I had not signed anything. That unsigned document, the one his brother had told me was routine, standard, nothing to worry about, was the thing that protected us. I think about that a lot. How close I came to signing. How the pen was in my hand. How one more minute of patience from his brother, one more soft reassurance from my husband, and I might have put my name on something I couldn't take back. My marriage did not end that day. But it changed shape, and I'd be lying if I said I knew from the beginning that it would survive. We did something I had suggested to clients for years and never thought I'd need for myself. We started seeing a couples therapist. The first few sessions were uncomfortable in the way that things are uncomfortable when you finally stop pretending. My husband had to reckon with the specific ways he had chosen his family's peace over my right to know what was happening to our lives. I had to reckon with the ways I had ignored my own instincts, because trusting him felt easier than asking hard questions. That last part was difficult to admit. I had noticed things. I had felt something was off for months. I had pushed and then accepted insufficient answers because pursuing the truth harder felt like it would damage something I wasn't ready to damage. In social work, I would have called that enabling. In my own life, I had called it giving him the benefit of the doubt. His sister and I talk more now than we ever did before. She drove from Vancouver for a weekend in the fall, and we sat on my back deck with mugs of tea and talked for hours. She told me she had been worried about her brother for years in ways she couldn't fully articulate, that the way he operated in the business had always made her uneasy, that she had raised small concerns to their mother once, years ago, and been told she was being paranoid. She had filed it away and told herself she was wrong. People do that. They tell themselves they're wrong because the alternative is harder. I don't know exactly what the resolution of the legal side looks like yet. These things move slowly, and I've accepted that slow is not the same as nothing. His brother is dealing with the consequences of what he did. The business is being restructured legitimately, with transparent accounting and independent oversight. My name is not on anything I didn't choose. My husband and I are still married. I want to be honest about what that means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean everything is healed. There are still conversations we have that bump up against the scar tissue of that year. The year he went quiet, and I went along with the quiet, and neither of us told the truth about what we sensed was happening. Trust, real trust, is something we are building again from the foundation, rather than assuming it exists because the years are there. What I know is this: the moment I stopped being a passive participant in my own life was the moment I slowed down in that conference room and said, I need more time to read this. I had been trained, by years of being a trusting wife and a good daughter-in-law and a low-conflict person, to apologize for slowing things down, to feel unreasonable when I asked questions other people found inconvenient. That training almost cost me everything. I'm not angry anymore, most days. What I feel now is something closer to clarity. I know what I will and won't sign. I know what questions I will ask and keep asking until I get a real answer. I know the difference between someone protecting you and someone managing you. I know those two things can feel identical from the inside for a long time. And I know that the person who saved what remained of my marriage was not me, and was not my husband. It was a woman who got on a plane from Vancouver with a folder of documents and walked into a room where she wasn't supposed to be, and told the truth out loud before I could sign it away. I called her the morning I decided to write all of this down. I told her that what she did in that room was the bravest thing I had ever watched someone do. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, I just couldn't watch you not know. That's what the whole thing comes down to, I think. Knowing. Being allowed to know. Being trusted with the truth about your own life. It shouldn't take a woman walking in from the airport and a room full of people going silent for that to happen. It shouldn't have to be dramatic. It should just be what people do for each other, especially the people who promise to. But when it doesn't happen that way, when the truth needs to be forced into the open by someone brave enough to force it, you learn something about who the people around you really are. And then you get to decide what to do with what you've learned. I'm still deciding. I think that's okay. Some things take longer than a year to understand, and I'd rather take the time to understand them than rush to a version of the story that feels cleaner than it actually is. What I can say with certainty is that I'm still here, still in the house I almost lost, still married to a man who is working, genuinely working, to be someone I can trust, still talking to a sister-in-law who saw the truth before I did and chose to say something anyway. And I never sign anything without reading it first.